everybody, and welcome to the Geek Apocalypse podcast, a brand new one where we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. I'm actually recording this, so if you want to actually see me actually recording the podcast while I'm doing this, you can do so on our YouTube channel. We're back, as the title will say, that I'm officially back, and I'm gonna explain where I've been, and be brutally honest, which is something I'm, becoming known for, I suppose, or becoming a cunt. I don't know. It's nice to be able to say that, knowing that I'm not on a radio show, not being allowed to sort of say what I want to say, to in a sense. But yeah, thank you so much for giving me a second chance. I know it's been a long time. I just looked at the old records and was on the Geek Apocalypse site a few days ago and didn't actually realize it had been about 7 months, I think, since I actually did a podcast. At least 7 months since I actually released one. So I have a lot to catch up on with people. This is just going to be an update, so it's not going to be a particularly, there's no guest, I should say. It's just going to be me talking about all the stuff that I need to talk about in regards to why there is a gap, what life-changing stuff that I've been through, how lucky I am to be able to be doing this. Where I'm currently recording from is probably going to be the first talking point, but I just wanted to kind of do what I usually do in all other podcasts and do a little introduction about what it is that I'm doing, and where I've been, and what all that other stuff. So if you want to actually see me while doing this, I'm looking particularly well, I have to say. If you're listening to the audio version of this, I think I'm looking particularly good. I've had a radical new haircut. I have dreads, which you can sort of see on the visual version. I'm toying with people now who are listening to just the audio version. I'll be toying with people going, but he's talking about the visual stuff and we're not listening to the visual stuff, which means we're going to have to go all the way to YouTube. And I'm like, ah, ha, 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 ha. So you see, you do get a slight disadvantage with audio if there is a video version as well. But you get to see me, which may not be a particularly good thing, but we shall see. I just noticed as well, there's the two strings. That's really annoying me. Some people with OCD as well might be like, put the string down, it's really annoying me. So if you are one of them people, you welcome. but welcome to the Geek Apocalypse podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, like I said earlier. So first things first, it's been pretty obvious throughout this whole podcast that I've been doing is that it's well known that I have a mental health disorder, and particularly I have bipolar disorder. It is a very brutal version of it. I'm not claiming that to be, that it's worse off than any other mental health disorder or anything like that. Or there's people who may not who have bipolar disorder, like in terms of the scale, may have a lesser form of it in terms of a medical sense, and that make it sounds like I'm going, but so that doesn't matter. I'm just stating a fact, which is interesting because a lot of the time when you put facts out into the public domain, they very often get questioned as if it's an opinion, which is completely different. You can have an opinion about a fact, but it doesn't make the fact different, and that's what's so beautiful about telling the truth. And beautiful thing about facts is they're irrepeatable, and I love them for that. So I'm just stating the fact that I have a very, very overwhelmingly difficult disorder, one which I shouldn't survive. And I know that when I said this to certain people, that they kind of think that I'm doing the whole violin act, which I know that I really don't like people doing myself, which is all good, because I get the reason that people feel that way. They feel that way because they don't want to hear the sort of bad side of life, and they want to go through this kind of very dictatorish viewpoint of, I'm going to have nothing but good thoughts. I'm going to have nothing but good experiences, not realizing that the good experiences get better going through the bad stuff. I think there's too many situations where you get put into a good position and you fight to stay in that good position when it actually isn't benefiting you in terms of actually like experiencing a whole life and stuff that you actually want to do. It's almost sort of too easy. Having said that, I understand that because it is obviously, like I said, easier to live that life. But on the other scale of it, I wish that I hadn't have went through what I went through over the last 6 to 7 months. And in some cases, I'm still going through it. But one of the things that this podcast and I hope is known for is, I may fuck up, which I know that I have done. I may have said things that I didn't mean to say, or I may have been over the top in the way that I've said them. But the one fundamental thing that has always made me want to do the best I can is telling the truth and helping people, and that's really what it comes down to. Very often when you talk about something you go through, it's the really easy thing to do is to say that it's selfish, is to say that you're only after one thing, which is sympathy, or everyone to go to your line of thinking. And I really resent people who have that approach, because it just doesn't, it's not useful and it's not beneficial to anyone. Because would someone like me, who goes through something every day, which I do, want it to be in the public domain for the really just basic point of I want people to know? Because 99% of people would, pretty much everyone, would not want their private life out in the open as much as mine's been. So you have to ask yourself, that's nuts if I wanted to do that, and I'm not crazy. I know that some people would love to debate that, but I'm actually not. And so if that isn't the reason, then why did I do it? I did it because of the emails I receive of people who are too scared to do that, and I want them to not be. And that's just being compassionate about other human beings, which is something that nothing else in the earth can do. That's the reason that we are human beings, is that we care about we care about ourselves as a species, or at least we should. And I care a great deal about the people who talk to me about how difficult their life is, and how simple, how easy it can be to make their life just a tiny bit better. And I always refute people who say that that's not a worthwhile thing, because how can a worthwhile thing not be making someone's life easier? Now, the counter argument to that is always that it's to do with how much do you hurt yourself in doing that? Well, I always kind of look at that as, I help people regardless of, because that is a separate entity to my own health. Like, someone else going through something does not hurt me. They could say whatever they want. I know for experience and evidence that that's not the person they are. They're just going for a particularly bad time. It's a bit like if you went up to somebody. It's a bit like I got told, actually, I'll say what I originally had in my head was that a person came up to me the other day when we were doing a radio show, which I want to talk a little bit about on this, because it's something I've been working on. And one of the things that really struck me with this story was, this guy said he had a brain hemorrhage, and because of the emotional, the brain damage he'd received afterwards, by recovering from this brain tumor, is that he ended up getting but he's been diagnosed with having bipolar disorder. So that's like a biological, environmental thing has made him actually get bipolar disorder. He may have had it before and it's manifested itself, but he seems to think that it's because of his brain injury, which is, if you look at any of the evidence of people who suffer any form of brain trauma, like post-traumatic stress all that kind of stuff, that it's, that you can get a mental health issue as a byproduct of simply being hit in the head, or witnessing a traumatic experience, and living it as well. And he made a really great point of, he said he talked about his story, and he said, and he wanted to talk about his experience and help people not go through the same thing. So he was telling us about it, and obviously we were all in a room with a bunch of other people who had mental health issues, and we were listening intently. And he makes this story and this point of that he was in a room talking about this and said, "Oh, I have a brain hemorrhage and this, that, and the other." And a guy in the room responds by going, like, with a sort of dismissive tut of, "Yeah, but I've had 3." And you kind of, and I just instantly shook my head in rage, really, because that is so not that is so awful that someone is literally being competitive over something truly terrible. Because you both have to look at the real thing of that you've both survived it, and you are the lucky ones that have, and he clearly is like that. And one of the things and really that is what it comes down to in regards to any form of mental health, is that you've always got to look at the character of someone as opposed to the mental health, and look at the evidence of who they are, and see the evidence of the character, the real person they are, versus the mental health that they're going through. And it's always going to be worse at a particular time. It's never going to stay the same. It's not going to be the same stuff all the time. And in some ways, I often find there's some people I know that I've met in my life, similar to that story I just told about the guy being competitive, people who are just, their character is to put people down. Their character is to be competitive in a bad way. It is to make it out that that the world revolves around them, and that's nothing to do with mental health. That's just their character and their personality and the way they've been brought up, and various other things. And it's almost like, if you wanted to play the whole comparison game, which you never really should with mental health, but if you want to do the whole comparison of, I always make this interesting point of, would you rather have someone who is a moral abiding good human being who tries to be the best he can be, or do you want someone who's average, who just occasionally pisses you off, like deliberately? Or would you rather have someone who was a great human being when well, break down for a couple of months every few years, which is usually what happens with people with a severe mental health disorder or illness? And I would always go, I can't for the life of me. I would rather have someone who was truthful and honest, who was like that, than someone who just constantly just has that in their personality, to be a dick consistently. Because I can categorically say, when I am like what I am now, talking in this podcast and on this video, I am completely a capable human being. I've done a lot today. Some stuff I can't go into, but I will be teasing that in this podcast. But the stuff I really I can be incredibly productive when I'm well, more so than probably normal people, because I have elevated levels when I'm like that. So that's the benefit of what I have. Does that mean, through the fact that my worst time is worse than most, that I should be discarded and not be known? Because a lot of the time, that is what happens in any form of mental health stuff. And I guess the reason that this is the introduction I'm going for is that my life has significantly changed from July, which is when I stopped doing these because I got too ill to do them. So there'll be people who don't like me being honest and frank, like I always have been. I mean, if you look at this, I actually would say, in a really valid point of, look at the other videos on the Geek Apocalypse YouTube of the ones of me in hospital, and look at the one me now in my own flat that I have rented, that I have moved to, and look at the difference of person, and tell me I haven't achieved something, and tell me which is the real me and which is the one you abandoned, because it is more like, because I hope that you realize that you've abandoned this person, not not which was me, but someone who just was going through something incredibly bad and just needed people to stick around. But yeah, my life's totally changed, because basically the story goes, I went to the UK Games Expo, which was amazing, which was the last podcast we did, and I started to feel ill. I'd mentioned in a blog post I did a while ago that that I wanted that in the January of last year I was starting to feel really down. My mum was going through cancer, and that was a really difficult part. And I got a lot of pressure put on me for that. And obviously I was trying to build Geek Apocalypse up, as well as working as a youth worker and being involved in other stuff, and it was just becoming too much, because the stuff that I didn't want put on me was being put on me, unintentional. Well, you can debate whether it was intentional or not, but it was there in terms of the pressure of looking after someone who's ill and various other things. And it was just becoming too much, and the warning bell for me in regards to getting help was down to going to a school. And I really hope there's no parents listening to this who kids have I've taught kids before, but I hope you know that I was doing the responsible thing, and you look at it that way. That I remember going into one of my classes, and I didn't care what happened. I remember my brain telling me, my very broken brain, telling me that I didn't care what happened. I just did not want to be there. In every sense of the word. You know how, like, you can go to some parties and you just don't want to be there, and you just regret going. It was nothing like that. It was much more overwhelmingly extreme, that I literally would have gave my right arm not to be there. And that obviously emotionally destroyed me, because I am incredibly responsible, I'd like to think. And I did the most responsible thing, is that I said I needed to leave, and I left, and I basically took a leave of absence from work. I think I took the last 2 weeks off. I remember feeling that way though a week before, and when I felt that way a week before, I did the really stupid thing, like most people do, is I tried to persevere. I tried to go, well, there's only 3 weeks left in the school calendar. I'll be finished the stuff soon. And that's not what happened. Obviously, I hit literally rock bottom. I went to tell some people I knew. To fast forward it, I ended up ringing Wayne, who's been on this podcast before, a friend of mine, and I ended up ringing him and basically saying, look, I just can't live like this anymore, because I was going home and just breaking down all the time. I was scared and angry, frustrated. I basically was not in essence, looking back, I was not in control of my emotions at all. I was sort of keeping them at bay with my last scope of energy, was trying to not let my emotions get the better of me. But when you have bipolar disorder, it is really impossible to do sometimes. And when it gets to that point anyway, when it gets that extreme, so I rang my friend Wayne, who rang the crisis team, and they came and looked after me. And now one of the things I want to say about them is that, and I'm now able to say that, is now able to say all this, is the crisis team are absolute waste of time. There are some people who work in the mental health profession who should not be there. When you are a mental health professional who are dealing with the most vulnerable people on the face of the earth, and you treat it like a job where you actually don't really care, and it's also done to a standard of they're so afraid of doing the right thing because of legal stuff, so they'll have like a folder of responses that they just have to say because that's the protocol. So it treats no cases in an individual sense. So someone like me, I can only speak for me, like in terms of the real experiences, that I needed a great deal of help, and the help I received was minimal. Because basically what they ended up doing was they came to see me and speak to me, which is, I love that, where you're going through a really terrible time and you're struggling to speak and you're struggling to do, and you have people who you don't know come round to your house and you talk to them for a couple of hours and they basically say the most generic shit you'll ever hear in your entire life. And I know I've actually heard people who have had mental health issues who I've argued with who have said the really pathetic thing. I mean, pathetic's not maybe the right word. So I don't mean it in that harsh manner, but the real ridiculously stupid thing of, well, at least it's there. At least you have that option. What kind of an option is it? It's a bit like going, well, I've got this gun. It doesn't work, and the bullets don't fire. But you've got a gun. What more do you want? That's a really stupid way of looking at it. Like, because if you're gonna have something like that, don't be half-assed about it. Especially, imagine being in such a vulnerable state where you are needing the help you need, and it isn't there and it isn't happening because because of the way that it's run. I mean, that's even worse in some point. I bet there'll be some people, if you ask them about being in that situation, who would prefer to have no hope than false hope, because that's really what's portrayed in these kind of situations, because the word crisis team implies you need to be in a crisis to be looked after. So they determine what a crisis is, rather than someone who's ringing them up because they feel they are going through a crisis. It's so the twisted logic of them determining what is a crisis when a person is going through something terribly traumatic and is needing more than they can get in their regular life. I always find it interesting that people kind of make it that you're a failure for ever reaching that point. Like, that they have went to some sort of school class that you missed or skipped through truancy, and all of a sudden you're not intelligent enough or clever enough or able to cope with everyday life, not realizing that this isn't an everyday life problem. I actually would go as far as to say, from my experience, that there's been some terrible stuff happen in my life, such as my uncle committing suicide not too long ago. And that's horrible, and it really affected me and everybody around me who knew. And it really but I was able to cope with that because I understood it, and it wasn't me that was going through it. And as much as I wish it never have happened, but I am able to cope with other people's pressures, because that I don't see. I almost think it's more selfish if you are affected by other people's problems, because that manifests itself in that you're taking away. It becomes something else if you have a problem with it, when it has nothing to do with you. Like Like if someone comes up to me right now in my room, in my bedroom right now, and says, "Stephen, I have a problem." Well, and in my direct original, my straight response to that is, "Well, I've got a problem that you've got a problem." Now, everybody in the entire world would say that I'm a cunt for saying that. Absolute cunt. And they're quite right to say that. They're quite right to be naturally, because why, that someone's went to the trouble and the trust to say that I have a problem, no matter how it may be, and they're willing to share that to you because they feel that you're worthwhile enough to do. Now, I don't think people spend enough time realizing how honored you should feel about that. That someone's going to the trouble of telling you something incredibly, sacred to them. And there's some people I know have told me some unbelievably rare secrets and said, I've never told anyone this, and then I never see them again. Um, and it's like, then is that really is that really is that really such a secret that it just is. It's interesting because there's so many different ways you can look at it, and yeah, it's just it really it's. But anyway, I've lost my train of thought there. But it was basically yeah, it was to do with the problems with if someone comes and you say they make it your problem. That was what I was on about. And yeah, it just basically, I am one of my oldest friends always refers to me as saying that you're the greatest person to get advice from. You don't take advice from yourself, which he's absolutely brilliant at that. I've often quoted him in therapy sessions and various other things, because he's absolutely right. I do not listen to myself often enough. My instinct is very often right, and I don't listen to my instinct often enough. Um, and it's to my own detriment, really, but it doesn't stop me, regardless of the way that some people treat me and etc. It does not stop me from trying to live my life that way, because I think it's noble, and I still look at that wave of being an openly able person to help as the way life should be like, because we've lost the ability to be sort of an alpha male. And what I mean by that is we've lost the ability to just be someone who just stands up and says, yeah, fucking I believe this, and I want to help people, and I want to do more, and I want to create an environment for people to prosper and be creative and make their life better. No, I'm gonna tell you all to fuck off, and I'm gonna live my life in a cocoon where I'm gonna be safe, but I'm not gonna I'm not gonna have any life experiences at all. I'm gonna go to the same place every week, with the same people, get the same reassurance, get the same maybe cheer, and that'll do me, because that means that I can pretend that that's more than it is. And I'm not dismissing that as that's a great thing. I get that. It's almost like I should be like, I get emails fairly regularly of people thanking me for being honest about mental health and being open about it. And sometimes I don't get hardly any views in my videos or whatever it is, and I really don't care. That's not really what I do. It's not really why I do them. I do them for my benefit. And I guess that's the thing that you should be most sort of thinking about, is that you do what you want to do, like in regards to what makes you happy, that you do it. But I see far too many people that have something that they're happy with and want other people to be happy that they're doing it, which I really don't think makes you happy then. I don't do these videos and whatever it may be to get emails and tweets or whatever saying what a great job I did. I don't. That's just the nice bonus. I'm doing this randomly because I decided to do it, and I thought it would be good to do because I want to restart the podcast and I want to do all this kind of stuff. And there'll be some people listening to this who goes, well, why didn't you think about what you were going to say? And I have thought about what I say because I've lived it myself and I can speak, so I don't need to do it in a particular order. I'm going to do it in the order that my brain is capable of doing it in, because that's the best way that I do stuff. And if it's not that way for you, then do it differently. But don't tell me that I shouldn't do it that way, because I know for a fact it gives me my best content by doing anything that way. But anyway, that was a total tangent about problems and stuff. But it was just an interesting point. I've been reading a lot about this. But anyway, thinking back to July with the crisis team, so very often, but the reason that this is relevant is that a lot of the time with crisis teams and various other mental health people who help you, is that your problem isn't their problem, which I find really bizarre, because that's the reason they have a job. There was one particular person in mental health that I screamed at because he was so shit at his job. He did the whole cliched things of always like, well, look at tomorrow. Tomorrow's a good, like, the most idiotically stupid man on the face of the earth, who is saying something that my 7-year-old nephew could tell me. My 7-year-old nephew, when he came to visit me in hospital, gave me more in the 30 minutes than he did in about 4 sessions with this guy. He was so crap. And that's not me wanting to be disparaging, because believe it or not, I want people to be good at their job, especially when you are in a vulnerable position like I was in. But when they're not, isn't that the most, realistic point where you go and valid place to go, actually, I don't think you're good, and I don't like what I'm being given in this environment, which is exactly what I did. Because they essentially lied to me. I was in a position where I was getting better. They were giving me medication for my bipolar disorder, and then they gave me too much of a gap waiting for the next stage of recovery, which in my case would have been therapy, with a professional, psychiatrist, which was the original plan. They left me in the loop for about up to 2 weeks. I ended up getting worse because my medication stopped working. And I then rang them and finally got an answer to say that their fax machine was broken and they hadn't sent my referral, which meant I went from being a priority case to right back to the drawing board, and they refused to admit their mistake. So they basically, because I was no longer in the process of being in a crisis in their eyes, and because they had fucked up to not send me to the next people, I was right back to as if I just rang them up and said I have a problem. And they're going, well, we've dealt with you, so you're no longer an issue. I mean, the backwards logic in this fucktard of a system, it's just ridiculous. I mean, they were looking at some points at 10 years ago notes from my GP from 10 years ago when I was in sixth form, telling me how I should be treated from a 10-year-old bits of notes, which is completely, it's almost like, in some aspects, I mean, it's like having a broken leg 10 years ago and then going into hospital and the people going, shit, we don't know, we've suddenly forgot how to repair a broken leg. Can we look at the notes 10 years ago when he broke his leg the last time, just to give us a refresh of how we're supposed to heal this person? It doesn't matter in regards to mental health what it should be. It should be used in the generic talking of how to treat somebody to see what he has been given. But to kind of just assume it's going to work the same time, that it doesn't. The chances are that it won't. And for them to make such a flippant decision in that manner is so bloody ridiculous that I can't for the life of me understand how they thought that was a good idea. Um, but to kind of convey how awful the situation was for me and everybody that was trying to help was that I ended up getting significantly worse. Um, to the point where I was struggling to do regular stuff. Because of the fact my medication was having a backwards effect, I was struggling to do everyday stuff. I wasn't working, so I had long days of going through these terrible symptoms, and then it just all blew up really. I steadily become worse. People started to decide I wasn't worth bothering about, which hurt in some ways more than the actual weird thing I was going through. Because it's obvious to say, and it feels weird for me even bringing this up, but it's obviously, even just me saying this, if anyone's listening or watching this video, then they will. Seems obvious to me to say that I was not nice to be around, because who would be in that situation? If I was watching someone that I knew go through something truly as terrible as I did, I wouldn't sit there and go, but why are they being such a prick? Why are they being so difficult to be with? Why are they asking for more things than they should when they did normally? I would just simply come to the straight conclusion of that they're asking for more stuff because they're really, really in a shit position and it isn't their fault. So I would never go to the lengths of starting to blame them for being in the awful situation of where they, especially when they're trying to get help. If I was in a position where someone came up to me and said, I tried everything, Stephen, to get better, and it's still not working, and I'm so struggling, and I'm really sorry for everything, and I know that I'm being horrible, and I know that I'm struggling, and I'm taking it out on you, and I'm trying to get the medication, but the medication's not working, and I'm just not thinking straight, and my brain's broken, and I'm lost, and I'm not working, and I'm trying ever so hard, and I've been persevering for the entire year, and I haven't felt any better, and I'm just in a really, really bad place. Now, my response would never be, well, fuck that. I'm gonna just decide, deal with it yourself. That's your problem. Because by the mere fact that they're bringing this up means that it is affecting their entire life. Which if your life includes them as a friend or whatever relationship or friendship you have, then that includes you. Because why else would you find out about it? You're finding out about it because they're struggling to live a normal life. And in some cases, like I was in, they're struggling to stay alive. And if you explain it that way, and then you hear people say, but I'm doing it to preserve myself. Well, what about all the times that you've got help preserving yourself by having all these great times, by having all these compliments, by having all these places to go together, and all these memories and experiences that have evolved you as a person that we all had a part of? I can't, even when I was unwell, could not fathom that line of thought. Because I get that it's difficult, I get that it's hard, but if you're watching someone who you cared about for all this period of time and then decided they're not worth caring about, it says more about you than it does me, really. So yeah, when you're going through that situation, I was completely exploding in terms of my mood disorders, and I was completely struggling to live with the feelings I was going through. And as I say, my medication might as well not have been taking it, because the positive effects was just next to nothing. So I ended up, the long story short, in a psychiatric ward in Morpeth, not far from not far from Newcastle. If anyone who's not listening from Northeast, and I really wanted to, the reason I ended up there is because basically the crisis team got overruled, because they started not helping me. They started not even talking to me. So a few weeks after that, a team from Newcastle came over and said, we're taking care of you because they're shit at their job. Let's be honest. There's no real other word to say. This is why I really hate people who say, why do you swear? Because they were shit. There's no other way of describing it. Like, oh, they were not good. No, they were shit. They were shite at their job. So they basically came over and said, we're taking over it and you need to go to a psychiatric ward. You're in too much distress. Your symptoms are getting worse. So that was why I ended up going. So I ended up going there, and I ended up was there for 2 months, which is a long time. Obviously, there's some people who get longer term stuff who are in there a lot longer, and some people are there forever, which is something I don't even want to think about. But even being there for 2 months was incredibly terrible. But I remember walking in there and feeling incredibly like I needed to be there, because everything outside of my life was crumbling, and I needed a place to basically recover, and I needed a place to not have, the stares of like, you've let everyone down, the stares of like, how can I ever have ever loved or cared for this person? Look at what they've became. That kind of stares, not the kind of scares. It's the stares at the stares of, we really care about this person and we'll help them and we'll keep them going through this. Because there's far too many people that go. I actually have heard people that when I was in there who actually said, well, I went through the same thing, and you just need to get through this, and I can't possibly help you through that. Which is so self-centered, because I bet you, and I've talked to thousands, I'm not like exaggerating, I talked to thousands of people in a similar position to what I was in since then, because I wanted to do some research about it, and I wanted to hear other people's stories, because I don't want to just talk about my story all the time. I want the evidence to say that I'm not the only person, because that's not being selfish. That's showing that this system's fucked up, and I actually had to do that when I was fighting them legally. Is that all of the case studies and all the people you talk to in the same position I was in, where you're fighting for your life every single day for 60 days, having 14-hour days where you're waking up at the earliest time and sometimes not even sleeping, and you're fighting every single second of every day just to keep going, and also having every single second of every day trying to find something to tell you that it's worth carrying on. And I've heard some unbelievably sad as in weeping, crying, sad stories of, there was one person I talked to the other day that said to me that they got better because a person in a shop told them that they cared about them and they wanted them to get help. And this person had not looked after themselves, was really struggling and was really struggling to be motivated and various other things, and they really wanted to. They were just going down a really bad path, and they had bipolar disorder like I did, and just a person in a shop that they regularly went to just took her to one side and said, you come in here every day and that's not a good sign to start with, and I don't think you look well, and I'd like you to go and get help. And that person, just through that encouragement, that one friendly person that sought a stranger, who just went out of their way. So that what? How much did that cost them then? How much did that cost them? Did that really affect their life? No, they actually made a real difference just by being kind. And I love it. And I love it, and I get incredibly angry with people when they say, but I can't do anything. Like, no one makes a difference. Like, any decision we ever make doesn't have any consequences. Or wouldn't that life be so great if everything we... But nothing would mean anything if we didn't have any consequences to our choices. So what is the goal in life? Is the goal in life to be in a position where we don't have any consequences, so we can just sort of chill and go, oh, isn't this great? We don't have to worry about upsetting anyone. Like, that, I don't want to be in that part. I don't want to be in that life. I want to debate things. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to experience stuff. I don't want to like do the same shit over and over again. It's completely meaningless. But just that one thing, that one kindness of going that we care and we want you to get better, got her into hospital, and she got the treatment she needed and got her own place and all that thing. And I just wish that person had the opportunity to tell his story of why he did that and encourage other people to be that way, because that is an honourable man. You know, if I had a daughter and she told me that she was going out with someone like that, I'd be like, he's a good, obviously he's got to have other stuff. He can't just, I don't want a person who beats my daughter or whatever. And he's like, but he's kind to strangers. But you know what I mean? But if he was a genuinely good person and that was the extra thing that he had as well, is that he was kind, I'd be like, that is an awesome guy. And I'm, so, proud that you've picked someone worth knowing and who doesn't just care about you and them. Because that's something I never want to get to. I never want to get to a position where I'm a couple where the only thing I give a shit about is my partner. Because I mean, it's a bit like people who want to be alone, who want to live alone. Like, I'm currently, I now have a flat, I'm now living on my own, and there's certain parts about it that I really love, but I do have feelings like anyone who doesn't live alone, where I wish someone was around sometimes. But majority of the time, I realize that I know that I'm better off living on my own because that's what I prefer. But it doesn't mean for a second that I don't care about outside of these walls, that I don't care about anyone that I've ever cared about. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. It's a bit like being guilty about anything that I've ever done wrong. Yeah, I've made mistakes, but I can't take them back. All I can do, I'm guilty about it and I'm hurt by it and I'm upset about them because I'm a good human being. I'm not going to just go around and be someone who's like, well, fuck that. I never did that. No, I'm going to say, I did it, and I did something that I really would love to take back, but I always ask myself the question I think everyone should ask is, would that person do that if they were in the right frame of mind? Because, and I know the answer to that because I know who I am. That's another thing that I find incredibly unfair that some people say as well. If I go back to the story I said about the person being kind to my friend who told me that story. It's a bit like I've lost my train of thought, because the reason I'm losing my train of thought, right? It's not a case of that I don't know where I'm heading with this. Is that there's people. There was some kids I could hear outside my window knocking on the door, knocking on that window behind me for those watching the video, and I just don't know who they are. Like, I imagine they're like playing on the street. I'm hoping, and they're not trying to sort of just break my window and break into my house. But anyway, I have no idea where I was heading with that because I've lost my train of thought. But anyway, I know where I was in terms of my story. So I was in hospital. And I remember going in saying, this is where I deserve to be. No, not deserve to be, but this is where I should be, rather. So I get there, and they put me on several medications to deal with my bipolar disorder, and also my depression, because I was severely depressed at the time. Bipolar disorder, what people fail to kind of get with bipolar disorder is depression is a byproduct of bipolar disorder. It's like a symptom, but it's not the cause. The bipolar disorder is what's giving you the depression, but depression isn't the whole thing. It's just part of it. But they were also wanting to deal with that because I was having incredibly depressed feelings. And obviously the reason you're in there is because you're suicidal. Incredibly suicidal. Which is why I said you spend every single day of every second trying to find some way of being able to remind yourself that you're worth caring about, when other people, instead of doing that, are running as far away as possible in your hour or week of need or whatever it may be. It says a lot about the human race right now that we just don't value positions we're in. It's a bit like when people often say that you should be grateful for what position you have, which people as a bare necessity should be already. It's a bit like going up to a woman and saying, you should be grateful that you're allowed to talk to me. And I'm like, well, I shouldn't even say that. That's completely an irrelevant argument, because of course, how dare I have the right to talk to them? It's all about what kind of a person you are, not what gender you are, whatever it is. It's like, I really just hate this one-dimensional thinking of you should be just grateful for this and that's it. So we shouldn't prosper in life. We shouldn't look at the things that matter. We shouldn't care about another human being, even regardless of whether we know them or not. And we should just be grateful. We should just be grateful, which like that's everything, or that you just are not grateful at all because you want to make your life better. I don't think it matters what kind of position you're in and what kind of life you have. That should be your goal no matter what. You should always want to make your life better than it is. Because I don't think it's true that you look at certain people who say that their life can't be better, and very often are not, they're kidding themselves. Very often my sort of theory about couples who are affectionate in public, they're actually sort of hiding the fact that they're actually not that happy. Because the most secure couples and longest marriages I've ever seen, they do not need to be public, to show public affection. They're people who can be in a room, and because they're so comfortable around each other, they just have this aura, this unspeakable aura of, you just know, like, if they go, oh, my husband's here, and I'm like, oh, is it such and such? Yeah. And if you ever do a sort of survey of the room and ask them if they don't know, who people around who don't know them, or guess who this person's husband is, or guess who this wife's is, and they're most likely going to get it right, because there's just this thing, this awe that they have around them, and I'm aware of it when I'm around people, and I love that. I mean, that's obviously the golden thing in regards to being with someone, is you want to have that such a strong connection with someone that it's so secure that you don't need to really work at it that much. I mean, obviously you've got to work at all the random shit that comes along and life throws at you, but you don't have to work at, communicating with each other and being around each other as much. And I so love that when I say that. I just remembered what I was during that backtracking. I remembered exactly what I was wanting to talk about was the character. I had people in hospital who were basically questioning who the real me actually was, like who is the real Stephen, who is the real Hesse, whatever, and what's sort of really interesting in it, and it's almost like, so 90%, if I was 95% of the time was a really great human being, and then 5% something awful happens to me where I'm not getting the help I need and I break down and I'm just, I'm a shadow of the person I was, but I'm still the person that you decided to know, and that all, goes pear-shaped because of someone else making a mistake. It's not a case of me not being able to cope because I'm weak. When you look at the odds of people who shouldn't survive bipolar disorder, the fact that I'm still here should be lauded and applauded, and we all should be. Anyone who comes to you and says that bipolar disorder should be an example of somebody who can cope with it. Because there's very often, for everyone that says that, there's several other people who aren't able to say that because they're no longer around. And that's such a massive point. But yeah, what I remembered is about the character is, so if you go back to the story of my friend and the guy who was really kind, if I told you that story and you went, well, if she was like that for 2 months, there'll be somebody listening to this, or someone you'll know if you tell them the story, who'll say, well, yeah, but what's the point in caring about someone who won't look after themselves for 2 months? Why is that my responsibility? Because they should be responsible for themselves. Which really does not understand mental health at all. Because you stop being able to be responsible for yourself. That's the very definition of what mental health does to some people. You're not capable of being responsible. And yet you get bombarded with people when it reaches that point who just constantly say to you, why aren't you being more responsible? Because you're not capable of doing that. It's like asking someone with no arms, can you pick up this bag of laundry? It's just such a basic, stupid point. And it baffles me. And I know it's just an uneducated bunch of people who do not spend enough time thinking about it, and again, like I said earlier on in this podcast, they want the easier life. They want to not be able to think more in depth and use more of their brain capacity. They want to think one-dimensionally, because when they think more than that, it scares them, and they don't want to feel like that. They don't want to be an emotional wreck, which I get, but very often you have a choice whether you want to, whether you have when you react to things. It's sort of like, would you watch an epic drama film, and it makes you cry at the end, and I know some people who are like this, where they'll go, oh, I really hate the fact that it made me cry. Like, I can't believe it. Like, I didn't expect this to happen. Like, oh my god, why am I crying? Because it gave you an emotional response, which is what life is about. You want to care. I watch a lot of stuff now where I'm going, I want it to cry. I want it to make me feel like life matters. I want it to go, wow, that was fucking amazing. That was brilliant. And what I'm so like, wow, what a greatly written thing that it's made me have an emotional response to something. But no, people want to just have generic musical shit where they just will go, yeah, I'll take it or leave it because I just don't want to feel anything, and I'm gonna continue to be involved in the stresses of life. That's gonna be my bubble. I'm gonna continue to be in this bubble of stress where I'm gonna think about bills, and I'm gonna think about responsibilities, and I'm gonna think about the structure of my life and how monotonous it is, and I'm gonna structure it to be even more monotonous, and it blows the mind, really. But if I told you that person who was like that way for 2 months, who was couldn't feel responsible for themselves anymore, what the key thing about that story is that the person is reinforcing what's inside their brain. It's forcing the person, the exterior person, the external person, which is this person in this shop, is planting this seed into the brain of, but think more about this. And what people fail to realize is that can't come from the person that's ill, because they've really struggled to do it. You know, they can do it in a very limited capacity, but nowhere near the capacity that you can. So that is why they constantly are asking you to do it for them, because they can't. And I know that that's a massively huge burden, and it's not right at all, but it's understandable. We had to take a bit of a break there because I didn't actually realise, and the software I'm using to record this show is I don't know what's going on with the apologies as well for the colour. I have no idea what it's doing. I have quite a good webcam inside this laptop, but it's not particular. What I find really annoying, and it's a bit like sort of Windows 8. Apologies, Microsoft. Other operating systems are available, but it just has no. I can't seem to get the settings for the webcam inside this particular laptop, so I just let it do its own thing. So it seems to work out well. I mean, it is an HD webcam, so and this laptop's pretty expensive, so I hope that it all works out okay. But I was in the sort of mid rant there when it stopped because the software I'm using apparently only lets me record it for an hour at a time. So we just hit an hour, which is amazing. Feels like 30 seconds to me. I guess it's because I'm enjoying being back in the fold, really. But yeah, but it is understandable. What I was getting to, it is understandable that the person who's going through something as terrible as that is not capable in looking after themselves. I mean, if you look at the really basic analogy of why I ended up the way where I ended up. I ended up where I ended up because I was in hospital because I was unable to look after myself and I was unable to get the help I needed outside of it. And that should have happened way sooner. But basically they gave me loads of medication, which didn't work. Ended up having a knock-on effect. I mean, I was in hospital the middle month. So like about 2 weeks in, I was sort of feeling like, oh, I'm in the right place. I'm getting a little bit better. And then in the month in between, just went through absolute hell. Like the worst I've experienced is I've had two major breakdowns in my life with manic depression, and I know that I've had several sort of mini ones in between that not a lot of people know about because I try and keep them hidden. But two major ones where my whole life's exploded in terms of being difficult, and this was easily the worst I've ever experienced because I started going to the toilet about 30 times a day for a long period of time. I mean, the joke and story I talk about in regards to being in hospital was I was actually on the toilet that long that I had flipped out and smashed some of my room in when I was feeling, went through one of my manic episodes being in hospital. So they put me on 15 minutes of looking, of people coming to check on me. I was in the toilet that long that it came to see me 3 times to work out the maths, and had to get a male nurse knock on the door going, Stephen, are you okay in there? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just on the toilet. Well, you've been in there an inordinate amount of time, so maybe, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to come and check that you're on there. And I went, okay, fine. So he opens the door and he looks in, and then he just sees me sort of leaning over, going, hello, and he's like, yeah. Yeah, and I can hear him. He was like, all right, yeah. And then he shuts the door and he's like, and I can hear his muffled thing of like, yeah, he's on the toilet. And it's just like, I was just like, can you imagine? I was just like a bunch of people coming to witness me having a big shit. It's just like, well, that was what it was like. It was just, I mean, it's funny now, but obviously it was incredibly traumatic at the time. But the real serious point is, can you imagine being in a situation where you're literally, that's all you're doing is being paralyzed in your bed because you're taking so much medication and you have to keep taking it because it's worse if you just get taken off it, and the rest of the time you're spending it going to the toilet all the time and just feeling sick, so sick. So not only are you mentally sick and you're being treated for mentally sick, but your physical health's dying as well. Like in your brain, your body's basically going, I've had I can't do this anymore. Like this is too much. You're literally poisoning me. And the worst thing about it is you're being poisoned by the very people who are supposed to be helping you. And it sounds like that's a very vindictive way of looking at it, but they're only obviously trying their best. But what's problem with the system is a lot of the medication I got given before I ended up in hospital was given before the professional team, like the top of the range professional team. You ever get near them. So the access to what you need outside a hospital is only available when you get serious enough to be in hospital, which is what's wrong with the system. There's just not enough people. And I hate how flippant some people can be about that. It's like, oh, well, there's just not enough people, Stephen. So, if you die because there's not enough people, well, it's just the way. I really hate the phrase, that's just the way it is. Because imagine how many things you can add to that sentence and say that's just the way it is, and have people who'd say, well, that's unacceptable, Stephen. You can't say that. Like, well, it's just the way it is that some people are incredibly racist. Doesn't mean we did that, because apparently in that framework it means we shouldn't educate people to not be racist. But we did, and we're continuing to do so. It's not our responsibility to educate people as to why it's none of their fucking business who you sleep with, and to stop any gay couples choosing to get married and choosing to be together and choosing who they want to sleep with. It's none of their fucking business. But apparently, it's just the way things is. So, because in that world, no one has the ability to change their mind. Which, if you think about intelligence, the key intelligence in anyone is being aware of the limits of one's intelligence. So actually being aware of how ignorant you can be. Because I often go into situations and I don't go, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, I know, I haven't a fucking clue. When I ever did podcasting and stuff, I was like, I never just went, I'll just jump into it. I'll figure it out as I go along. No, I researched it and I figured out how to do it before I even started this. And it's the same for all the other future stuff that we're doing that I can't currently talk about, but we're basically looking into expanding the company now that I have some time off, which I'll end the podcast by talking about my current situation, but trying not to talk too much longer. But obviously this is a lot's happened, so I'm trying to fill 7 months into one podcast, so it might be, it's a little bit longer than I thought, but it's understandable with all the stuff and as well as my ranting in between. But this is, I'm already feeling like this is what I should have done a while ago. But circumstances dictated that I wasn't well enough. I should maintain that I went into hospital in September and was there for 2 months, and I got out just before I turned 27. And it was horrific. And to tell you how bad I got and how much I wanted to die, because who wants to be in a scenario where you sign a bit of paper to say you're no longer a citizen, you're no longer able to vote, you're no longer able to walk out the door, so you're literally confined into a 4x, like a room not too dissimilar to this bedroom. You see, when you own something or rent something like I'm doing now, you love the bedroom you have because you're renting it because it's yours, rather than going into somewhere that you're not asked to be in and you get told when you can leave it. Wherever you're listening to or watching this now, if I just said to you right now, right, with my click of my fingers, every entrance to the said room that you're in, I've locked, and I have the key, and I'm not letting you out unless you tell me why you're going to leave and where you're going to go. That's a horrible, horrible existence. But no one spends enough time thinking of that, because all they think about is why are you so ill that you end up in a place like that? Why are you so weak-minded? Why are you not doing enough, Stephen? Why are you struggling? Blah, 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 blah. It's never about the real circumstance and the real situation. It just isn't, because that is not what people want to do. They don't want to face the real reality of the situation. Yet the horrible part about it is the person going through it is the one that has to, and he or she is regularly reminded of it every day. You know, I had to get up every single day of being in that hospital, just like anyone else who goes through something like this, and had been forced to talk about how I felt every day, and just how shit I felt, you know, and how suicidal and worthless I felt. And watching my entire life outside of there, they're always saying, think of the world outside of there that you want to get back to. The world doesn't come to you when you're in that situation. That's the one thing I hated about it. You know, you want the world to come to you to remind you that you're worth caring about and you're worth living, and they just say that they're too busy, they got too much to do, when it's a matter of life or death, and they do not want to take responsibility for the fact that you're quite happy to be friends with them, but you're not quite happy to help them. To, you know, when something that's serious as like a life or death situation happens, you suddenly pretend that you never knew them. And I would never do that. It's like what I just mentioned earlier on about my uncle committing suicide. Does that mean I should never acknowledge ever knowing him because he did something that he clearly did because he was in pain? And he didn't want to live that anymore. And the only thing that I thought of at that particular time was I didn't get angry. I didn't go, how dare he do that? I looked at it with the objectivity of going, I wish there was something we all could have done to stop him feeling that way. And I know there's going to be cynical people who'll say he would have probably done that anyway, which means that we shouldn't try. And that's the thing that's the sentence that most bothers me about the way that we deal with illnesses. It's like we don't think we make any bit of a difference. And yet when I tell you, there was one particular friend that helped me during this whole thing, is she wrote letters for me saying how great I was, and they were on my bedside table, and I would read them every morning as a way of getting out of bed. That's how great they did. And then that said person disappeared, suddenly decided I was no longer worth knowing. And they all became, instantaneously when that decision was made, all became reasons why I shouldn't beat this. And yet, that's acceptable. There was people who said that's acceptable. That's acceptable to lie to that level, to say that none of this and all of the memories before are meaningless. We're okay with that decision being made. Not wanting for a second to educate themselves and to look at it objectively and say, this is someone I decided to care about. This is someone who is worth caring about, and look at the situation he's in. But no one has the ability now to look at things objectively. I mean, look at, if you go on a random, I dare anyone who is listening and watching this now to do an experiment on Facebook, which is one of the reasons I'm not frigging on it anymore, and go on and look at your home post and look at what people post about, and count the number of things that is about someone else that someone's posted about, and it's like there's nothing. There's nobody promotes other people's stuff. It just doesn't happen anymore. It's all about what show they're doing, what they're up to, how many kids they've got, baby photos. It's all the tinsel of this life where it's like, wow, isn't things amazing? Yet I always look at the opinion of, if you had a great life and you were having so much fun and so much enjoyment, would you really be on there? I mean, I have absolutely no motivation. You know, I like hearing how people are doing, but I want to hear that when I see them. And so the people I'd want to actually generally know that about, I'm going to see them. Like tonight when I see my old schoolmates, so I'm looking forward to hearing what they've been up to. I'm going to see them and I'm going to ask them what they've been up to. And I get to hear it back like a regular human being. And I was like, people who go, well, yeah, but you can't see everybody. But just do that as an experiment and see that it is essentially a bragging tool to basically say what they're up to. And as I said right earlier on, if you really, really liked what you were doing, you would not need to brag about it. You would just get the instant satisfaction of doing it regardless. You don't need permission off anybody else to have enjoyment. Like, I play board games with a bunch of friends, different group of friends. I play as often as I can because I'm not currently working, which I'll get to. I do that 3 or 4 times a week if I get the chance. I played 2 nights ago. I'm playing tomorrow. And also I play video games with my friends sometimes now as well, which I'm really enjoying doing because I never got the chance to do it when I was working so hard. Now I don't want. Why would I then, after going on them, want to spend the whole time saying to people, guess what I did? I went out and played board games and had a great time, and it's a shame you weren't there. I was just like, well, because everyone knows me, that knows if they know where, if they want to be part of something, they just need to ask, and that's it. And if they're not there, then the chances are they don't want to be. So why I don't know. It's just, we seem so fascinated now with this idea of liking something. Let's get a thumbs up for that. I'm doing something that people are going to give me validation on because I'm not struggling, and I'm getting validation with thumbs up, and I'm not being lazy, and I'm not going towards my life goals, and I'm not following my dreams. I'm just following this paper trail of thumbs up of people who are just all in the same position. And I don't understand, but I just want you, please do that experiment if you're on Facebook at some point, and see what I mean. It's an interesting viewpoint. But to show how hard that was, the period of time I went through, and again, I can only speak for me. And there's there'll easily be somebody who was probably in a much even worse position than me and not got lucky enough to heal as quickly as I ended up doing. But I got so suicidal and so sick that at one point I thought my kidneys were failing because of the amount of medication I was on, and it just was not. It was having such a bad reaction, and so they realised that what I was taking was harming me, so they were trying to slowly take me down from it. I'm not taking that drug at all anymore. Actually, funnily enough, this particular drug, venlafaxine, that I was taking for depression, for the depressive side of my manic depression, bipolar disorder, was a guy I met through this radio show, which I'm going to talk about in a second. At the end, was he told me the exact same thing, that he was on the exact same highest dose of this venlafaxine and nearly died. For taking it, because he ended up trying to sort of lead his normal life, and it was actually had a knockback effect basically, and he really struggled after that, which he needed treatment for that, which kind of shows what it's like really, and that's just one side of it. I mean, and that's just one particular drug, but that's the sort of nightmare that you face, is that if medication's involved, it's very often trial and error, so it can have a real detrimental effect, or can have a real positive effect. No one's ever really sure. But anyway, so I was so down, so sad and ill, and felt destroyed by the small smidgens of hope I ever had during that whole time had been taken away from me by people who just claimed it was too hard. Because they had the decision to not care anymore. I know, as much as, the thing that shows what kind of person I am is that I went through what I went through, and it never at any point stopped me caring about anyone I knew. So, what does that sort of say, really? And I still care, and I always will. That's I'm always going to be that person that cares, because I say what I mean. And the one thing I promised during that whole thing was to get better, and even without a lot of the people that some people I said that to, I still did it, which is more than you can say for any promises that were made to me. And I know there's going to be a legitimate case being made that it's all about this rather pathetic way of looking at things, is to say who was weaker in that position, and it's an irrelevant It's an irrelevant question. The reason it's an irrelevant question is because if you care about somebody and we both mutually care about each other, it shouldn't be about who's weaker. In terms of the whoever's the weakest gets the choice of whether to care or not, or whatever it may be. It's like, yeah, there may be somebody in a weaker situation, and even if that was the case, it would always be the person in hospital who is fighting for their life is the weakest one. So even if that was a valid argument, it's not a valid argument for the person that is helping the person who's fighting for their life. Never. It's never the same. It's not even quantifiable. I mean, it's bizarre. But anyway, I got so distraught by what happened, that by everything, and the sheer hell I was going through and not being able to find it. There was no real. It didn't feel like a solution to it, really. That I ended up going into one of the quiet rooms. I smashed a desk drawer when no one was like sort of looking. Well, I actually took the drawer into my room and then smashed it, like sort of delicately, to take the nails out to try and cut myself with them, and I very nearly succeeded. That I lost a great deal of blood, and I honestly can say to you, and I don't really, someone saying, Stephen, why are you even talking about this? Because it's true, and it happened, and of course I'm not proud of it, but as I'm talking about this, I can feel how I felt at that time. And if I felt that way as strongly as I did then, because I'm only getting a fragment of just thinking about it, if I felt anywhere close to that again, I know I'd feel the same way again. Because there's no way anyone can deal with that amount of dread and loss and loneliness and all this negative emotion. But I very, very, very closely nearly died there. If they hadn't have found me, relatively quickly, and heard the commotion I was going through, very often might have been a different story entirely. Now I suppose the question that maybe mentioning here is, how do I feel about it now? Like, am I grateful? Like, of course I am. Now I am. I'm hugely grateful that I got through that. But at the time, with how I felt about the way I was being treated and the way that everything was going, and I know there was where the way it's like, if I say the way I've been treated, and I know there'll be some people who'll say, what a selfish person, he's so self-centered. But you're in an area, you're in a position where you have to be self-centered, because it's literally that or die. Which shows how serious it was. So it's not up for question. It isn't up for debate who is in the worse situation, because people who were coming to visit me saying that, oh, well, I'm going for a particularly bad time at the moment, but they got to walk out the fucking door and live their lives like with a roof over their head and a place to stay and all that stuff. And it's a bit like going back to the thing of, well, at least you've got it, Stephen. Yeah, no, at least they've got a place to go. But then there's a whole other argument of there's people trying to take them fucking away, saying we don't need them. Yet we need more psychiatric wards to help people like me in that situation. We need more help. It's such a stupid, ignorant viewpoint to kind of go accept what you've got. Because if anyone was in a situation where they were in a position where it wasn't good enough, you'd fight it and go, no, you know what, fuck that. There was a really interesting thing that I read the other day about, if you've got friends who you don't argue with and don't tell you that what you do is wrong, you really have not got a real friend. And I totally agree with that. Because the people I really admire, the friends I really like and really appreciate are the ones that tell me that they don't like what I've done. And tell me promptly, not 3 months later. Because I can do something about it then, because I'm a good person. And I can say to them, I'm sorry, I had no idea I was affected. Because why would I ever do something intentionally as to hurt someone I care about? I don't think that way. So, because anyone who debates with me my thought processes and makes me think about, the other side of what I'm doing is a useful person to have around. Because sometimes, like some of my oldest friends will say to me something like, Stephen, that is such a stupid idea, and I would tell them, and I would argue with them at length, and we get into an intense argument and debate, and I'm like, well, I think you're totally wrong, and I'd listen to why they've got a problem with it, because I value their opinion. But it doesn't mean that I'm then going to take that and go, well, that's completely 100% right. I'm going to completely change my viewpoint on it. No, I'm going to make an informed decision based on what they think as well. And I'm either going to take their advice or not. But hearing what they have to say is valuable. Because very often it'll be the opposite of what I think. There's one particular friend I have who I think is really has one-dimensional, ignorant views about mental health. But to his credit, he often says to me when we talk about it that he says that I educate him more about it because he doesn't know much about it. And he sort of, he has, in fairness to him, went from sort of thinking that no one should ever get treated for it, and no one should ever get time off work for it or whatever, and it's not really a real thing because I can just claim I'm ill as well, and all that kind of thing. He's went from that to be somewhere in the middle. And that's progress. But it doesn't mean that because he's got that... I mean, I really didn't like him for having that viewpoint, but he's entitled to have it, is my point. I wouldn't go to friends who have such a different opinion about something and decide, fuck it, they're not worth knowing then. Because then it's just not useful for me to grow as a person. It just isn't. It just isn't. But there's far too many people that think that their opinion is what should be I have an opinion. Therefore that is fact, and that fact should be tolerated. And that's not how it works. That's not how it works. There's at the end of the day, there's always going to be someone who's right and someone who's wrong. And there could be certain situations where it is a misunderstanding, and that's all it is. And it's a lack of understanding. And sometimes you need to have the moral compass to say, actually, that's what it is, and we need to be reminded of the fact that that is what it is. Why would that person do that said thing? If someone I knew of 20 odd years, if my friend Scott or anyone, or Phil or Graham, came to my house now and knocked down my door and started screaming at me, I would either assume they've got a really good reason for doing so. I would assume that they're incredibly pissed off, and I would obviously be angry that they've decided to do it that way, but then I would calm them down and ask what the hell was going on. But I would never go, oh, look who it is, it's old... Oh, look at old Graham being a right moody sod again, because that isn't in his nature. So clearly something is wrong. It's not that. It's deceptively simple. But I'm internally grateful for the fact that I actually got through all of that. And I don't really know how I managed to do it either. I ended up getting out of hospital just before bonfire night, because I made this joke that the fireworks were for me leaving, which was obviously not true. went back home, and I have a very strained relationship with a lot of my family because the way that my family dealt with it was appalling, uh, and really misguided, and kind of showed really everybody around me how weak-willed my family actually are. Because they never take responsibility for anything. They took responsibility in the sense that they knew that I was ill, but that was as far as it got, because it then became an argument of who was responsible for the fact that I was ill. It was never and it was not even about them, which is typically how a lot of families, deal with this. And I get annoyed when people say that, oh, it's typically how families deal with this sort of thing, like, as in, like, oh, well, that's just, common knowledge that that's the way people do it. Well, that's not right. And we should do better. That's not right. That's not how we should deal with it. We should do more. And we should deal with things appropriately, and for the person involved. And I'm not just saying this because I went through it. I mean, as I say, I've heard countless stories about people going through the exact same thing. And if you don't care about me anymore, and if you don't care about mental health anymore, or anyone that goes through it, and you just want to pretend it doesn't happen, then I hope you're aware of that really ignorant stance, and actually realize that you could be one of these people that ends up getting it. And if you do, you'll know about it, and you'll be uneducated in terms of dealing with it, and you're putting your own health at risk. And not only that, more likely than not, if it isn't you, it'll be someone you love dearly in your life, really close to you, will struggle and will go through a really bad period in their life, and you won't know how to handle it, and you probably will look back at something like this or other experiences in your life where you'd say, I really wish I'd handled that differently. Not just to be a better person, but also to learn about what that person went through, and actually realize that it was just a person that went through something terrible that I really, really cared about and wanted to do all these great things with, and now that's not going to happen because I just decide I can't deal with them. But you can't deal with him, and you can't deal with his illness. But they're one and the same. Yet, all the evidence points to that, it's not a case of me, it's not a case of anyone with mental health just deciding to be a horrible person. And I guess that's where the trust comes in, that people lose trust, really, is what it comes down to, is that they lose the trust of that you're telling the truth, and that you're actually saying, no, look, I really am struggling. But when people say that's down to trust, I always often say, well, is it not down to the fact that all the evidence of however many years that I've known you is I am a pretty good person to know, and you've stuck around long enough, which means that you really do care about me and you want to see me more, and you always are like, wow, he's here, that's awesome. And yet now, I know that there's certain places I'm going to go, that I may end up going to again, where I'm going to be looked at as a bad person for being ill, and having the balls to be open about it, and doing it not for my own vindication or my own of going, this, I don't deserve some of the stuff that happened to me. No one deserves to be that ill. No one deserves to suffer that much. And the byproduct of that, no one deserves either. But that's the reality of it. That's as far as it should go. It should not come down to blame. But I guess it's easier for some people to deal with what life throws at them by just deciding to blame said person. Which I can't do anything about. And I still like to at some description, but I know that my efforts are going to be regarded as mad or whatever it is. So I can't do anything without it coming across as that I'm to blame, and that I'm always going to be tarred with this person who's still ill. When if you talk to anyone who knows me, who was loyal enough to stay around during the whole period of time, I am pretty much me again. And I'm really proud of myself to get that far, because I never ever thought, when I talked to you about nearly dying that time in November and we're now in March, I never ever thought I would say that ever again. So I have an estranged relationship with my family after that. I didn't get much help after I left hospital, which is another sort of joke, really. But one of the things that I did end up getting was sick benefit for a year and a half. I currently just had an assessment about a week ago saying they don't want me to work. That's like medical reasons. It's not like a legal thing. It's that they don't think I am well enough to work, to be responsible, which I have to say I agree with. I don't think I'm fully there yet, but one of the things that I'm happy about is I'm being constructive, like doing this. Because I'm feeling well enough to do it today, but then I might have a day tomorrow where I'm a blithering wreck. Like I had a bad day yesterday, so I was like, I would never have done this yesterday. So I should mention as well that one of the things I decided to do, because I was so sick of being at home, was I walked out after arguing with my mum incessantly for ages, and I just decided to go to London. To which my family's response was, when I even told them, like, I just need to go somewhere and I don't care, is that my mum rang the police and regarded me as a missing person, which I can sort of understand, with the whole fact that of what I'd went through, that people thought I was doing something crazy. In their eyes, that word crazy, which I've thrown around far too much, but that's an argument for another day. But it's interesting that the amount of effort that went through something that I didn't want to happen, that I just wanted some space to myself, and I went to London and thought about what I needed to do and all that kind of thing, and just was like, I'm sick of my life and I'm sick of the way things are going. And all that effort to get me to come back to Newcastle when I was only doing something I wanted to do, if any of that effort, an amount of effort in finding me with the police and everything, even though I just was saying I wanted to be left alone, which is generally what I said, and the fact that it got that far was ridiculous, would have meant and done significantly more benefit if it was done, say, 2 months before that, in terms of actually helping me through that time. If someone had made that much of an, if my family and everybody included in that made as much of a fuss, it would have made a blind more bit of difference than the detrimental damage it's done since doing that. Because they've made the situation a million times worse. Because my mum essentially asked me to come all the way back to then decide I wasn't worth caring about and threw me out. And yes, I guess because I was so angry with the way that she treated me, and I still am. It doesn't mean I don't love my family, and I always will, but I think I'll always have an estranged relationship with them, because for whatever reason they'll always sort of blame me for the way it's for everything that happened. Just like certain people do. If they want to be that narrow-minded and forget what person I was and am, that's up to them. There never seems to be much I can do to change that, because like I say, if I ever try and do something to repair that damage, even though I wasn't the one that I got ill, that's not something to be blamed for. But I think if I try and if I try and ever do something about that, I just get accused of making things worse. So I'm going to do the logical thing of not doing anything, and let them figure it all out on their own, hopefully. because as difficult as the situation was, and I wish it was different, I wish it had went differently. Then that it wasn't. It could have been dealt with a lot better if people weren't so absorbed in how they felt about everything. But yeah, so basically, one of the things that they said I should do is, instead of, being this person who who's looking after my mother and everything else, that I should get my own place and just decide not to care about that anymore. I obviously still do, and it's hard for me because I did that for years, and I want to, and I can feel that my heartstrings going, but it's my mother at the end of the day, and I want to make sure she's okay. And that's the type of person I am, regardless of what people say, I'll always be that way, I'm, I shouldn't be attacked for that, for making, sort of very morally justifiable decision of wanting to look after someone who looked after me, and the reason I'm here. I did that for way longer than I should have done, and I didn't really get any credit for it. And that's something I am passionate about doing, is sort of speaking on behalf of the carers, really, because that was something I was for a decent period of time, and I want to. So I'm gonna be more proactive in talking about that, really, because I essentially was for several years living with my mum on my own, and my mum has Parkinson's. If you want to know more about that, there's an episode about that on the Geek Apocalypse podcasting where I talk to my mother about that. But yeah, I have my own place, and this is the reason that this is where I'm recording from, and that's what I've been spending a lot of time doing. So I managed to move all my stuff. I still have some stuff I need to pick up from my parents, but I'm incredibly happy, which is, I'm kind of being over the top about. I'm not incredibly happy, but I'm content, which is a word I don't use very often, but it is. When I moved into my own place, obviously I'm getting help to do that, what with being sick and not being able to work, so that the council helped me out in that regard. But it's when I first walked into here a couple of weeks ago, I really thought my instinct was telling me that I should have done this a long time ago. But as I say, circumstances dictated that I was under pressure from my family and my mom to stay where I currently was, and obviously when I'm trying to sort of do things unconventionally, like running a business and trying to make my own money through freelancing and self-employment, it's hard to put aside some capital to get your own place. So the fact that I'm able to do it this way is an obvious help, and I'm really grateful for that. But I would rather get my own place and not be well and not have all that shit that happened to me. But then, at the end, the only thing I can do is learn from it. And like I'm trying to do is trying everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen again. Which I tried to do since the first time. And I managed to do it for 8 years without hurting anyone. And hopefully it won't happen again. And I guess that's what I guess maybe that's what scares people, is that maybe that I can't guarantee that, but then I can't guarantee that you're gonna go out in town and get run over by a car. Statistically, that's likely to happen to someone. Could be you. The odds are just the same, really. And so for me to be tarnished by that is wrong. But again, I don't think people spend enough time thinking about the statistics of how at risk they are just from having a regular life. There's actually people who die on the toilet, and not like Elvis, where it's just like he's overweight and falls over. But no, I mean there's actually legitimately people apparently like die on the toilet in America for like tripping over and banging their heads and shit. I hope they're not drinking from it. That's the way my horrible mind works. But yeah. So fast forward to now. I say I have my own place. I'm gonna say where. I don't want some people to know, but and I'm looking at making Geek Apocalypse bigger. One of the things that being sick means and being on sick benefit is it gives me a chance to look at what I'd like to do with my life. And one of the things I've always wanted to do is to expand this, and this was always in my business plan when I first started. And it just means that I can actually spend some time really making it work, as opposed to being involved in it, doing podcasting every week like I was, and also doing my youth work and that. That actually I can, take the money that I'm getting for while I recover to be able to work again and focus on building the business plan for something that I was gonna do anyway with Geek Apocalypse, which I'm looking into now, and I'm working really hard on it. And that was something I planned on doing anyway, like I say. So it just means, and so if there is a silver lining to all this, it gives me the opportunity to work on something and not be worried about looking after myself and from a financial point of view, and hopefully it'll lead me to do something I really, really want to do, which is Geek Apocalypse. Like, it made me incredibly happy, and I became known for it, and so I really should, I really, really should, make sure I stick to that and not let the other stuff get in the way, really, which was mainly, hopefully, with my family pressures being put out of the equation, that I don't, because if I'm not going to get respected for that, and I'm not going to get, sort of, look at it objectively, like I keep saying, then I'm just going to do it. I'm just gonna not take that abuse anymore, and basically take myself out of it, and let the shit hit the fan, as it were. And I know there may be some people who say to me that that's incredibly cruel, but it's, when you've done something for a long time and you are not really getting credit for it, and you're doing it to someone you love, and especially with blood, that you're always going to love them in some way, and you just don't really feel that you're getting any sort of credit for it, and you're getting very little help. And not only that, but they're actually stopping you from getting more help, and they're not helping themselves, and that is what I have a problem with. I do not defend anybody who's ill that doesn't go to the trouble of at least trying to get help for themselves, which is something no one can ever say I haven't done. I constantly tried to get help for myself, and I ended up having to fight the mental health system legally in order to do that. So if anyone turns around and says, well, I left Stephen, a really great friend of mine who I adored and said all these great things to, I left him because it was becoming too much and he was just refusing to get help. And he was relying on me too much to be that help. And I'm like, well, what would you have done in your What would you have done in my situation? It's not right, but it's the way it was always going to end up, and therefore it comes down to whether or not you were regretting ever knowing me, which I certainly don't feel that way about anyone I've ever met, and that's so. Again, I think that says more about other people than it does me, really. Because one of the things I've done, which I'm working on, so I'm working on expanding Geek Apocalypse, so you're going to expect more podcasts coming. I'm already looking at getting a list together to do more as of this point, so hopefully please do start, if you wouldn't mind letting people know, if you are listening to this or watching, to let people know that I'm around again. I'm going to come up with a list of people I want to be on the podcast. I'm going to email them. I'm going to do some Skype interviews because I'm able to do that now, having a super fast internet connection. Yeah. Can't say the name of them because might get a warning about but they rhyme with Bergen. So yeah, I'm gonna look at calling in some favors of people I've met over the years and seeing that if they'll, now that I'm restarting the podcast, maybe get some old friends back on the show. And I'm also going to talk to some other people as well, some new guests. One of the things I've been working on that I encourage you to check out is over the last month, I've been working on a community radio show called Mentally Sound. This is something I got asked to do by Mental Health Northeast. and I'm incredibly honoured to do it. We did our first show on the radio on last Friday, and I was the host. I also edited the thing, and also did a 10-minute interview pre-recorded interview with Sharon Race. So I'm hoping to get on the podcast at some point. And I'm incredibly honoured to be asked to do it. It's all done by people who have a mental health issue of some degree, or are involved in the mental health community, and it is basically to showcase that we are all normal people who have a not normal problem, which I really don't like. And the fact that I've just said that, because I hate the word normal, but basically we are human beings like everybody else. This is probably a better way of phrasing it. We are human beings like everybody else, who just goes through something truly terrible, but it doesn't define us. And which is an interesting thing, because I know I talk about it all the time, but it really doesn't define me. It is a fact that I have it, and I acknowledge it, and I embrace it. I think that's really the key difference. Some people think I probably over talk about it, but it isn't my whole life. The only reason that I talk about it so stringently is because it's wrong. But if you ever spend any time, if you spent a whole day with me, I probably talk about mental health about 1% of it. The rest of the time I play board games and video games, and do work and chat to my friends, and most of the time I'm doing creative stuff, playing music or whatever. I'm that's the real me. So the fact that I post about mental health, and if you judge me for that, maybe you need to look at yourself in the mirror and think, yeah, what about all the other stuff that Stephen does that I know that he does, and he never mentioned, he doesn't talk about that the whole time. Think about any conversation I've ever had sitting with anyone. Do I really bring up mental health the whole time? No, but I do if someone's fucking someone over. Because that's the moral thing to do. But yeah, I really encourage you all to listen to the Mentally Sound. It is available on It is available on iTunes. I don't know. I think it's called Mentally Sound, but I'll try and thingy up a link for you to have a listen to it. But I'm really, really proud of it. The podcast version has minus the music, so it's a little bit edited funny, but we had to do that for copyright reasons, obviously. But one of the things I think I'm going to do to end this segment is I'm going to play some of my own music. So I'm going to play a track of mine, because I have an album online which you can listen to on Bandcamp for a limited time. But please, if you like it or like one of the tracks, please download them. I think it's a minimum of £5 I put it on, but it's like 13 tracks or 14 tracks, and I'm planning on putting more on. I'm actually going to think about putting my comedy song on there as kind of like a bonus track. But I'm really happy with it. I keep constantly thinking, oh, it's really not that great, and I kind of just put it all together, and it's all my recordings all like mingled together. So it's not really a like mass produced album. It's just a lot of my raw recordings. But I actually really, really like some of them. So I guess if I like them, then that's the whole point, really. I'm not really. So I guess if anyone says, I'm not really sure I like that, well, I would disagree. So please, I'm going to play that to end the podcast now. I don't really want to go over 2 hours because I've already rambled enough, so I'm going to leave it there, really. But so yeah, Mentally Sound, I'm working on the radio show. Going to be more podcasts, so please do let people know that I'm back. If you're listening to this, thank you so much for giving me another chance. If you're watching, hello. That's just for the people who are watching the YouTube stuff. Please watch the YouTube stuff if you're listening to the audio, and vice versa, because you might get a different experience. But be prepared to look at me, the Hesse monster. But yeah, so I'm really, really excited to be back. I really want to do this again. I now feel well enough to be able to do this and kind of keep to some sort of schedule. One of the things I'm looking into doing actually while I'm off as well, because I am scheduled to be off work for 1.5 years. Whether that change, I imagine that's going to change, but they've given me sick money till then. which I fought for, which I think it's them being extra nice, because I didn't even know they did it until they sent me a letter saying, oh, by the way, we're giving you a year and a half sort of compensation for what shit you've been through. So it was quite nice of them. But one of the things I'm looking to do while I've now got a PS4, or you can get an Xbox as well. Just I don't want to be diplomatic, but get a PS4. But yeah, so I'm gonna be looking at starting a Twitch channel. I think that's the next logical step for me, really. Now that I've got an opportunity to be able to potentially record my stuff, I'm gonna sort of do my research about that before I sort of like go, all guns blazing and whatnot. But I'm really sort of super excited for that. So I'm gonna look to do that. Just keep the stuff promoted. But once I find more about what we're gonna expand Geek Apocalypse with, I will let people know. But expect the website from now on to be updated once I put this up and everything. So I'm really super excited to get the opportunity to do this. It's really super cool. But yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to be alive. I hope this has been more positive than anything. I know it sounds incredibly negative, some of the stuff that I'm going through, but that I went through, and the way that I talk about some people maybe, but I tell the truth, and that's what I care about, to the point where I'm actually thinking about getting a tattoo that says truth on it. The truth is better than fiction. It always will be. It's like I've been watching a lot of UFC stuff with Dana White, and he says, and I just look at him in terms of a business sense and how great he is, and he says, like, I may want the fight to go one way in terms of my own personal preference, but the way it ends up is always the better way, which is just such a great way of looking at things. And I want to get that Walt Disney quote of dreams can come true, if you work hard enough at it, or whatever that quote is that Walt Disney does. I know he's an anti-Semite and a horrific man, but he did come up with some good cartoons. It's a whole other debate for another show. Michael Jackson, was he like that? But his music was good. It's just, yeah, another argument for another podcast maybe. But yeah, I'm hoping to get some guests and some hosts done. I've already got some provisional people lined up for the next one, so I'm going to start trying to do these maybe, hopefully weekly again, because I really miss doing them. So this has been really fun. So if you've given me the opportunity to listen to me, no matter how long it's been, thank you so much. Like I say, I'm going to end with one of my songs now. I'm not really sure which one yet, because I've actually just decided to do this on the spot, but it'll tell you in the credits. It'll probably be Being Alive, or maybe Looking Forward to Failure, I don't know. But I hope you enjoy this song. And as I say, if you want to listen to all my stuff, you can go on bandcamp.com/looking bandcamp.com Stephen Hesse / Looking Forward to Failure. Stephen.Hesse, I think it is. But as I say, there'll be a link somewhere for you to have a gander at. But thanks a lot, guys. This has been fun. Thank you for the support. Thank you for remembering I exist, and I'll here's to recovery and long life. Oh, I should end with this actually. For those, if you do listen to the audio, please look at the video when I now reveal my tattoo. That's it. Love life. I don't know if I can say that any more clearly, but thanks. Bye. Oh, in the words of the great B-movie Robot Jocks, crash and burn. I really miss saying that. Okay, this song is called Being a Human. Sometimes I don't feel part of this world, even when I have everything to dream. I just wanted to tell you that I know you're not the first to feel that this soul ain't real. Why can't we learn to love
what it means to survive. 'Cause we don't have forever to share that moment of being alive, and I sometimes want to hold you, and I sometimes wish it wasn't as hard as it is right now. But if truth be told, if we got what we wanted, then it wouldn't mean anything at all. But who am I to tell you how you should feel? If you are down, then I'll be around. Just be yourself, not anybody else. 'Cause sometimes being truthful, being honest, being true is more than you'll ever need. I just wanna hear the truth. We got nothing left to lose, just as long as you be what you can be. Why can't we learn to laugh together instead of always looking back? Can we think about our future instead of always living in the past? Yeah, the past. 'Cause I always want to hold you, and I always wish I wasn't as hard as it is right now. But if truth be told, if we got what we wanted, then it wouldn't be worth fighting for. Yeah, sometimes I don't feel part of this world, even when I have everything to dream. I just wanted to tell you that I know you're not the first to feel that this only real. And I sometimes want to die, and I sometimes wish it wasn't as lonely as it is right now. But if truth be told, if we got what we wanted, then it wouldn't mean anything at all. But this is what it's like being a human. Survival of the fittest. We'd be lucky to survive at all, at all.